Have you ever turned up to a party you weren't invited to because you knew the food was free and delicious? Of course you have. And that's what we'll be doing today. This is the Big Bot Bash, hosted annually by Bill from Bill Making Stuff. Quite simply, Bill kindly provides a bot generator, and much like your average Dublin nightclub on a Wednesday night, there are various distinctive features on display, each feature having 20 distinct attributes. To establish said attributes for your bot design, one must roll a 20-sided die, and here's how I got on. For the head, I rolled broken. For the arms, dangerous. For the body, seen better days, but haven't we all? For the legs, I got tentacles, and for the flavor, I got thief. And here's what I ended up with. Our bot will be a deep-sea mining drone that explores the depths of the ocean floor for rare earth metals as we're running out and the iPhone consumers need their annual upgrade. Today I'll be starting with the legs, and as we know, we drew tentacles. Now, I do believe that squids' tentacles are technically their arms, but this is my bot and therefore today they are legs. I was going to sculpt this entire bot out of clay, but to get into the spirit of things, I decided that I'd try kit bashing and see what happens. And to that end, beads. Lots of beads. And so I made little leg joints out of clay and then used wooden beads to build up the rest. I then shaped the tentacle tips into incredibly practical angry claws, baked and sanded to a sharp edge, and proceeded to make 7 more. I put all the pieces together, and this is what our complete tentacle looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 props. For the head, I opted for a large wooden sphere, which will need 8 little ports within which our legs can be docked. To make said ports, I'll roll out a thin sheet of clay through my pasta maker, wrap it around a wooden dowel, score in the breakpoints, and bake for approximately 8 minutes. Once baked, I can very gently sand down the rougher edges and saw an angle into each piece for a better fit to the head. I then want to make a metal cover for the underside of the bot, which I'll do by means of a larger metal circle cutter followed by a smaller metal circle cutter for each of the leg joints. A quick slathering with clay adhesive and I can press onto the head and bake. I'll then pre-drill the receiving holes for the legs. I'll lay out all the leg joints, give each a brush with clay adhesive, attach to the body and bake to secure. I then accidentally summon the White Walkers, and finally I can superglue the legs into place. And we have the cutest little Omni droid that would make Syndrome proud. And when Syndrome is proud,
no one will be.
With tentacles for legs, we're onto the dangerous arms, which will be the long feeding tentacles that squids are famous for. And for this I bought 3 packets of beads, not knowing the longevity of a singular bag of beads. And trust me when I say, 1 bag is enough. Quite enough. When it comes to beads, one might say, I have quite the dowry. Hindsight being what it is, had I done any planning whatsoever or given any thought to the colour scheme, I would have bought colour appropriate beads, which these lime green ones certainly are not, and will require painting at a later date, which will be maddening and make my brain just that little bit smoother. To make the tips dangerous, I made a couple of nondescript pointy doodads out of plastic card, which I can house in this little mechanism I made out of 3 clay discs. The central disc being trimmed to allow the claw to be housed, and also I left a small opening to the rear which allows me to feed the tentacle wire through. As these are wires, they are now indeed pliable and I can negotiate them into their final position later. And that's the dangerous arms complete, and we are on to the haul. So I quickly established dominance amongst the children in the local second-hand store by barefoot stepping on a Lego block whilst making eye contact with who I saw as the king of the children. I then proceeded to take whatever I wanted. First up, I needed to find a shape for the crest, so I bought an egg maraca, a fish clapper, and this smooth ocean panda. I also obtained this neat bag of tricks with the aid of my lifetime partner in crime for about 30 US cents, and it must be said that without this, there would be no project. A veritable treasure trove, if you will. It has these wings, which appear to be a little Pokemon-esque, and they could flank the hood. Some weird little bony legs. This bust that once rotated becomes a somewhat appealing crown. That could do a little something like this. A I've also got some legs with different feet that I think may be off bionicles, and this little helmet. This poorly conceived concoction I found clearly created by a child destined to be involved in a low-level data entry of some sort, but it came with this, a potential finial to a tiara. There's also some obligatory connects and this little whirlybird that we'll definitely find a use for later. And that's the haul. Let's see what we can come up with. Firstly, I try the fish clacker with a bust. Then, on a side note, I also originally had made these dangerous arms which had an energy pulse rifle of some description and a massive hydraulic dagger. But I found they retracted from the silhouette, and so I made the very grown-up decision to abandon them and save them for another day. At this stage I know I love the detail in the bust and it will be my centerpiece, and this finial shall be the crown jewel to emphasize the apex. With some down and dirty modifications I can clip, snip and saw them into submission. Unfortunately the same cannot be said for the wooden clacker. So, Plan B. Introducing Plan B. This is Willie the Orca, named so for the most iconic killer whale of my childhood, who is free now and possibly starved to death due to an inability to hunt. But we don't talk about that. Willie historically had fin issues, so let's pop that puppy straight off, and then for good measure let's horizontally bisect the torso to put him out of his misery. A quick fit check, and I kinda like this, so let's finish the job. Cleave off that lower jaw and pray to the heavens Toy Story is not real. I'll shave Willie's crown, do another dry fit, and select this little blue thingy as an eye. Why Cyclopean? I don't know. Just felt right. Now Willie's a bit too smooth, so it's time to sand the tip so that it may accept blue and pink better. I then glue to the front and drill. Oh, hello. I can then mount the eye to the helmet and lay out all my parts for the front, and here they are. I opted to use the wings as they fit so perfectly, and I thought that they can be riveted up later to lessen the Pokemon vibes. Much like everything else in this project, they did need a little bit of a clipping and a sanding before I could glue into place. I then fit the helmet eye into place and the centerpiece above. I was left with a slight gap at the top, so I stuffed it with a random greebly that had a lot of built-in grooves and character. On the back body, I start with a robot foot and the accompanying knee that will need slight modifications before gluing together and affixing to the back/orca head cavity. To give some indication of forward propulsion ability and utility, I add the small amount of connects I received and also the cap of a superglue tube I have exhausted, and finally the whirlybird. Whee! I still have some room left over at the back, and I also have these headphones left over from my Aliens Power Loader build. If you haven't watched that already, then I highly recommend that you do that afterwards. I can clip apart these dollar store headphones to get to their meaty innards, and I like the look of the speakers here. They could be literal speakers for communication, or music at a work barbecue. And as we all know, squids are essentially water birds, biologically, aesthetically, and functionally, so naturally we add this completely normal beak to Willie's underside. To demonstrate my previous proclamation that the dangerous arms negatively affected the silhouette, may I direct you to Exhibit A. But all was not lost. Within the robot's biceps, I saw opportunity for robot turbines, and I am pleased with this outcome. Mostly. If you're enjoying this video today, boys and girls, then do subscribe for more like it. Let me know in the comments section if you like the kit bashing stuff or how you feel about squid or calamari in general. It all helps the channel and gets the video to a broader audience. Now let's make some rivets. 3 ways. Way the first. Some clay rivets that are extracted with a circle cutter. Secondly, a yogurt lid that is punctured with a 1.5mm hole punch. And finally, I happened across this little $8 Mickey and Friends bead kit, which I purchased for the wax-tipped pen alone, but as this is a build challenge, we stop framed these rivets into place. In order to achieve our body brief of Seen Better Days, I'm opting to denature one side of Willie with a soldering iron. I'm doing this outdoors, as you can see, for what I hope are obvious reasons. With the plastic melting part complete, I'll scratch up the surface in the usual manner by drilling a few impact holes and filing in some rough surface damage. As this boy is a water-based Pokemon, it stands to reason that the ocean vegetation and barnacles might stick to him over time. And so I got some modelling paste that I'll apply all willy-nilly to the surface, then leave this to dry as I get on to making our unfortunate little diver. I start with a 1 to 200 scale businessman, then add little epoxy flippers that I trim to size. I use a kebab skewer to fashion a couple of oxygen tanks. I can then glue the flippers to the feet and the tanks to the back. And that is Scuba Steve complete and ready to dive for the glory of Rome. To make some gold for our thieving bot, I firstly wrap a thin sheet of clay around a ball of tinfoil and then impress in the texture with another ball of tinfoil. I can repeat this several times and we're on to painting. And as Bill says, painting time with Bill is boring time with Bill, and boring time with Bill is story time with Bill. So in the interest of tradition, I too concocted a brief tale for our wee Willie. As the field of medical intervention technologies continued to progress, the population consequently continued to grow to over 12 billion by the year 2180. The retirement age was pushed back every half decade or so, until the general population refused to work past 75. That still left them a good 25 years on average to enjoy their golden years. This population growth resulted in a higher demand for both rare and common earth minerals. Insofar as metals are concerned, we are still heavily reliant on iron for our steel gigacities, copper as a conductor for our smart devices, and gold to prove to someone we love them. With such materials on the surface level becoming scarcer and scarcer to mine, we turned to the seas and created super drones to process the deepest, darkest places of the ocean floor. This particular drone, the Model 1 Water Integrated Long Range Investigation Engine, or Willie for short, was the pride of the Atlantic. Built by the European Coalition in Lisbon and stationed at Port Cree in County Galway on the west coast of Ireland. Willie was for all intents and purposes a rather successful mining bot. So successful in fact, that over the years he garnered the nickname the Niffler, a much-loved rodent-like magical creature from the Harry Potter series, infamous for thievery and a love of shiny things. Over the years, the bot was so renowned for locating pockets of gold that during an annual service, Willie received a paint job to reflect that of the Warhammer 40k Bloodravens, a rabble notorious for their miscreant behaviour and thievery. He returned to the ocean as a red titan of the deep, with lashings of gold trims, adorned so befitting his successes. But on one not-so-special February morning, the bot was set to scan a new territory. The zone was uncharted, and early scans indicated a deep crevasse had opened up in the aftermath of a deep-sea earthquake, too deep and too far out to affect the land, but deep enough to explore for more riches. The sky was grey that morning. The salt was carried on the rough sea air, and the base technicians could taste the ocean on the wind of their cracked lips. To them, it was just another Tuesday on the west coast at Port Cree. They could see the fishing trawlers in the distance, some flying the flag for Spain, others for Ireland, each searching for cod, once a staple of the old-style chip shop, now a rare delicacy for the super-rich. As the grey clouds darkened and the sky began to rumble as it so often did, Willie disembarked from his station and began his long journey to the new crevasse, which was named the Kraken's Gateway. After 6 hours, Willie arrived at the Kraken's Gateway. It was colossal, at least 20 kilometers wide, and a black abyss. Willie began to dive. The cameras were on, feeding the scientists at Port Cree live information where they saw nothing new. The same deep-sea fish, floating vegetation, the same sea haze that made it hard to see 10 meters ahead, even with the advanced high beam on Willie's body. But what was that? Off in the distance, a soft orange glow stood out in the infinite darkness. A light. No. A beacon, tempting a visit, inviting an old friend to dinner. Willie proceeded. As Willie progressed, the measuring devices began to detect atmospheric adaptations. The oxygen readings were reducing, the biological scans found no substantial life forms, but most concerning, the temperature was rising, and rising fast. It became clear to the men and women back at Port Cree, Willie had set upon an underwater volcano that was spewing out molten magma and boiling the water around it. Willie stayed back. His outer hull was titanium, yes, and could of course cope with the high temperatures, but there were still parts of him that were simple iron, toughened glass. Best not to risk it. Best to keep your distance. Suddenly the earth trembled. The gauges whirled. The warning system sang like a carrion crow. The cavernous walls of the crevasse began to crack, began to glow. Then at a painful wail erupted. The magma burst out of the walls like dragon breath. Within seconds, Willie's entire left flank was encased in the now cooling magma. The machine turned, sought elevation, sought escape, safety. Willie's safety protocols auto-ignited his thrusters, then all went dark, and all was still. For many weeks in the deep lay Willie, motionless, withering, gathering barnacles and a society of crabs, until one not-so-special day, a red light began to beep within Willie. His system had rebooted. After weeks on a loop of attempted reboots, something finally clicked. Willie's protocols were re-established, and work could proceed. But Willie was not the same. His established primary functions were, of course, firstly, a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm, and his mission objective was to locate and mine for rare earth metals with minimal impact to marine ecosystems. It would seem within the chaos of the chasm, some significant damage was inflicted. Willie became rogue, no longer tied to the mainland overlord, nor a robot to serve the wills of men. Willie's protocols had morphed in the pit. His central motherboard, or brain so to speak, damaged to the point where his protocols seemingly, though unconformably, became collect gold. Hoard gold, no matter the cost. And so is the tale of Willie. He still roams the ocean floors, collecting gold, copper, and iron by the ton. He does not rest but for the brief moments to admire his booty. All the humans can do is watch their pride of the ocean as he sits upon his glistening throne of trinkets. Willie, magnanimous in victory that he cannot understand. Well, that brings me right back to high school writing short stories about hurricanes and other such disasters. Let me know if you liked my little story about Willie, or on a scale of 1 to Katy Perry, just how cringe was it? And anyway, let's get back to the video. Here we can see I'm attaching a snip of a paintbrush cap to Steve's body. Then with my sausage fingers I'll manipulate a teeny bit of jewelry wire into tubing to connect Steve's mouth to the oxygen tanks, which went a little something like this. Steve then gets adhered to Willie for the first time of many, and I'll fix a paintbrush cap to the underside of Willie for a future mount. I get these from my local art store. They just pick them up off the ground and have a box full of them, and they just give them out for free, so maybe ask at your local store if you need anything like this. The arms get glued into pre-drilled holes, and I finally paint the mounds of gold in a dark gold, then a light gold, then a small silver highlight before making an acrylic box. I firstly attempted a UV resin seal. This did not work. I then tried copious amounts of hot glue. This too did not work. In the end, I sealed the interior corners and edges with a liquid epoxy. This did work. For the resin pour, I suspended Willie off a wire and placed aside. Then with a mixing pot, resin dye, part A and B resin, a drill, some mixing paddles, I combine all the delicious ingredients and pour very slowly into the mold, using a paddle to ensure it drips in slowly and at an angle. Now, this is my first resin pour, and I'm pretty sure nothing could go wrong. So let's leave this overnight, and we can check in the morning.
6 hours later.
And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing more bubbles here than I did at the Big Bubble Festival of 2004. So let's demold this puppy and check the damage. Well, I would say that this was a rather unsuccessful attempt, but remember team, there is no failure, only learning. Subscribe if you enjoyed yourself with me today. Thanks to Bill for the big bot bash, and as always, enjoy some glamour shots. And until next time, go make a mess.